Stand by for action.
Drop your guns, everyone. And remember, I mean business.
What's your name, boy?
Joe 90.
An unusual name. What are you doing here?
I'm an agent for the World Intelligence Network.
Satisfactory. Most satisfactory.
Look, there are 600 people up there with about 40 minutes to live. Now, you can't help them, but I believe we can. Now, what's it gonna be?
It would seem that this Captain Scarlet is now indestructible. This presents us with the clear and exciting expectation that he will become our greatest asset in the fight against the Mist-Rounds.
If anything else goes wrong, I want you to be ready to act immediately.
Well, that was no ordinary breakdown. We've got to get up there and help them, but fast.
Thunderbirds are go.
Anything can happen in the next half hour.
Welcome to a brand new podcast called Puppets Go Boom! My name is Aaron.
My name is Patricia.
And this is going to be episode 1 of a celebration of Gerry Anderson and everything Supermarionation. And we are going to go back to the first ever, I guess you could say, Supermarionation show. And now some people say, like, well, it's not classed as a Supermarionation show in the titles. However, I mean, you can make the argument that First Blood isn't really a Rambo movie. It's First Blood, and then it was Rambo First Blood Part 2.
Yeah,
So,
or you know, for some people it's like, Nausicaa, the Valley of the Wind isn't technically a Studio Ghibli film. It was done by Topcraft right before they went over to being Studio Ghibli.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess you could say in the same way that is classed either as Studio Ghibli or a Rambo movie, this is classed as Supermarionation because it has Gerry Anderson's name attached to the title.
Yeah.
We are going to go into the Old West, and this is the episode about Four Feather Falls. This was a very interesting experience for me because I had grown up, by the way, to just start off as the first episode. When I grew up with Supermarionation, I first saw the re-release of Thunderbirds on the BBC. This was between like 1990 and 1991. I mean, obviously I wasn't old enough to see the original run like in the 1960s, even though my hair would probably suggest otherwise. But I saw it in the 90s, and it just blew my mind about how they could take this particular art form and they could just make it feel so dangerous and make it feel so exciting and just, you know, have you only go on the edge of your seat about, like, you know, what the heck is going to happen next. Like, it was such a really great experience. And so I guess you could say after being given that first off, and then given Stingray afterwards, and then after that we had Captain Scarlet, which blew my mind. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. And then it moved on to Joe 90, and then that's sort of kind of where it kind of pitted off for me, really, in regards to my experience of Supermarionation. I didn't really know what to expect when we first walked into Four Feather Falls, and now that I've actually seen it, and we've been through like all 39 episodes of it, I have to say that let's give this some interesting discussion.
Well, before we do, I need to give you my perspective of watching all the Supermarionation stuff because
go for it, yeah.
Yeah, as an American, I never knew about these shows at all. The only reason why maybe a lot of Americans would probably know about the style of Supermarionation, which for those who don't know what that is, it's a term that's basically a mixture between the words super and Mario and nation, marionette. Super,
marionette.
Yeah, it's marionette.
It's basically marionettes, but super. That's what it is.
It's basically that. So for those who are wondering, is this Super Mario, as in like the Super Mario Brothers? No, it's not. And the only reason why you would probably know about that particular style of, those puppets is probably because of Team America World Police.
I think what makes the difference between a marionette and, a super marionette, I guess you could say. And I think I'll probably compare it to, the way that we've talked about the Muppets in the past, with Jim Henson and everything like that. And I would say that, the Muppets aren't really puppets, they're Muppets. So, we've seen how they all kind of get put together. For example, where Big Bird, as we all know, was done by Carol Spinney for a very long time, and you could see that he was bent over in a really uncomfortable position, and then with his hand in the air, and then had a TV monitor to see where things were going, and that he only able to operate one arm at a time, and the other one was kind of like tucked away. And but same with the way that they have Muppets that were operated with like two hands, and then actually three hands, I guess you could say, two people and like one other person doing the narration while they had a headset doing the voices and everything. So it was the fact that the technology behind puppetry was improved to the point where you could make these people feel real and actually believable, and it could draw your attention away from the person who's actually operating the Muppet. That was the type of thing that Jim Henson was able to do extremely well. Gerry Anderson did actually for marionettes, I guess you could say. And that's the reason why we have today Supermarionation.
Yeah, and as for me, I've never saw any of these shows before coming into this podcast.
You didn't even know what to make of it to start off with.
No, I didn't. Like I said, the only thing I had in my mind in terms of like these kind of puppet styles was Team America World Police. And so I was coming into this 100% completely blind. I had no idea of the huge cultural zeitgeist that Gerry Anderson and his puppets were. I mean, coming from being an American, moving over to the UK and learning about all this stuff, this was like a brand new experience for me. And I just find it to be incredibly fascinating.
Yeah. I first introduced Patricia to Thunderbirds when we first came into this, because that was the show that I grew up with. We found it on ITVX at the time, when she came here to the UK, and so we watched through the entire show, and you were captivated with all of it. And by the way, I don't think we have actually seen this as of this podcast. We've seen Thunderbirds, we've seen the movies as well. But by the way, I know what's going to happen at the very end of this podcast series, and that is, are you going to see the CGI versions? Are you going to see Thunderbirds Argo, and are you going to see Captain the new Captain Scarlet? If we get to the end of this podcast and we have time to effectively do them, or if we take a hiatus and then we come back to them, that's something we might do. But if you let us know, and if you want us for us to cover the newer Gerry Anderson stuff, then we will let you know.
Yeah,
so.
Especially since there was announced that there are going to be doing a new project for Supermarionation stuff.
Actually, yes, and you'll hear this in one of the other. By the way, we sort of recorded these podcasts out of order, so you'll probably notice that we sort of wreck the continuity a little bit when we talk about this stuff. But yeah, as Patricia has mentioned, is that we are coming off, just maybe a couple of weeks ago, that Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera Europe have announced that they're going to be doing a Supermarionation show, Hit Squad, which was supposed to be released in the 1980s but never came to fruition. But now the Anderson project has now been picked up by Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera Europe, and they are going to be doing Hit Squad.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how they improve the technology from where it was back in the good grief. 40 years ago? I think it was even longer than that, maybe 60 years ago? I was talking about that. Good grief.
Yeah, that's crazy to think about. Yeah, and going back and peddling what Aaron said, if you want us to cover any of other Gerry Anderson's projects like Terrahawks or even the live action stuff such as UFO or Space 1999, again, let us know in the comments if you're interested in hearing about our thoughts on that.
The way that this podcast came to fruition is that this is the stuff that I originally grew up with, and I thought it was going to kind of stay within that. But then we decided, as we decided to put this podcast together, we thought, what, let's cover the other Supermarionation projects, and that's what kind of brought us to the first episode that we are going to eventually get to, which is Four Feather Falls.
Yeah. So I guess right before we go to Four Feather Falls, I guess we should briefly talk about Gerry Anderson himself, where, when he first started off, he was working alongside with APF employer Roberta Lee, where she was also a children's author, and they worked on various TV shows. One of the first was Torchy the Battery Boy, which was starting around 1958. And then afterwards, he worked on various other projects right before eventually he would have the opportunity to have his own TV show. And that would be Four Feather Falls, which he co-created alongside Barry Gray, who was actually the composer of every Supermarionation show that has ever been released under Gerry Anderson, and some of the live action shows. So, yeah, I mean, he's kind of like, Danny Elfman for Tim Burton, or John Williams for Steven Spielberg, in which he became a major staying power for Gerry Anderson in composing every single song that you hear in the franchise.
Yeah, the only thing about it is that I think what we're going to about to talk about here is the unfortunate kind of like typecasting, I guess you could say, of Gerry Anderson, because his thing effectively became puppets, and so they would expect him to like kind of like do, if he ever pitched anything, it would effectively be like like Thunderbirds, or it would be like Captain Scarlet, or it would be like Joe 90 or the Secret Service, or something along those lines. And so unfortunately, I guess he kind of befell the same curse as probably like what Mark Hamill and where Garrett Adam West fell upon when they became they got their penultimate roles, and became staples of modern pop culture at the time.
Well,
and
yeah.
I think because if you talk about Gerry Anderson, the first thing that comes up obviously is Thunderbirds are Go. Like that's the first thing that's he's synonymous with in regards to that. And don't get me wrong, like he did do other projects, and somewhere down the line, if you want us to cover them, we're most welcome to do so. But the one thing that you bring up when you talk about Gerry Anderson, even when you go to the if you're doing like operas or anything like that, like you go to the opera house in London, and the one thing that they did, which everyone loves to hear about, is the Thunderbirds theme. And when they talk about Gerry Anderson and everything like that, so like it's become such a thing that he's become so attached to. And that's not his fault. Like, it's just, that's where people have now, gravitated towards, because these are the shows that they grew up with. When the re-release of Thunderbirds and Captain Scarlet and, Stingray, then once again had another generation, where me and Patricia, we cover 80s and 90s nostalgia, effectively, like, on Old School Lane. And this is another show where we cover, things that happened within, obviously not within Patricia's childhood, but it happened within my childhood. And this is, another instance where another generation of kids who grew up with this stuff now, say, when you think about Gerry Anderson, you think about Thunderbirds, or you think about Captain Scarlet, or you think about Stingray.
Yeah, and I've actually gotten several requests from people saying that they would love for me to cover shows from other countries that isn't America or Japan. And so, yeah, I mean, I've had, major successes with our listeners when we talked about both Father Ted and we talked about Fawlty Towers. So now we're delving into a retrospective where we're looking back on the Supermarionation shows.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess without further ado, let's get into...
By the way, we haven't really done justice really for Gerry Anderson. If you really want to know the ins and outs of like what happened, behind the scenes with all of Gerry Anderson's projects, we urge you to watch the documentaries on 21st Century Films.
Oh yeah, there's
on
a ton.
YouTube. There's loads of them.
Yeah, there are tons of them. Yeah,
exactly. So if you get a chance to watch those documentaries, please do watch them, because they go on for like hours worth of behind the scenes stuff, interviews, things like that, all of it is gold. Yeah. And we urge you to watch it all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I guess without further ado, let's get into Four Feather Falls.
Yeah.
All right, so the plot is about a town in Texas called, Four Feather Falls, and it focuses on the sheriff named Tex Tucker, where he is protecting the citizens of Four Feather Falls from a bunch of bandits and hombres and a lot of obstacles that are along the way. There are basically two main bad guys who feature throughout the series. You have Pedro the bandit alongside with his companion Fernando, and then you have Big Ben, who seems to switch off with multiple partners in every episode. And then you have the occasional, one-off bad guy, but for the most part, you have Tex Tucker basically protecting Four Feather Falls from danger. And what's interesting about Tex Tucker is that he was granted the ability of several things. He can talk to his horse, and he can talk to his dog, and he has magic guns so that he can be able to fire without touching them. And the way he was able to do this was that he found a young... Okay, given the fact that this was released in 1960, there are a lot of politically incorrect things.
Well, let's try and use the politically correct terms for this. But
okay.
I just want to give fair warning. If you're going to go off and watch Four Feather Falls yourself, please keep this in mind. In fact, we're going to give this warning to every show that we're going to talk about this. This was recorded in the 1960s. This was still in the time of the civil rights era, and this was at a time when race relations were probably not at the best point in times. Like, where we were still having, all sorts of problems, going all the way up to, the middle 90s in regards to, race relations in, here in the England, I guess I would say. So any of the insensitive stuff that you come across in these shows after listening to this podcast, just keep this in mind. It was done at a time when these things weren't recognized.
Yeah. Okay, so
in this case, Native Americans are referred to as Indians in this show.
Yes, they are. Yeah. All right, so so Tex saves a Native American boy named Makuya, and as a reward, his grandfather, Kalamakuya, had given him 4 feathers. And as mentioned before, the 4 feathers give him the ability to speak to his dog Dusty, his horse Rocky, and has magic guns that can be able to activate without him touching it.
Yeah, and by the way, this was all in actually, the great thing about this is that they did all this, like, they did an origin episode with this about explaining, like, oh, hey, this is 4 Feather Falls and this is how it came to be, which I'm really glad that they did, because, one thing that, modern shows tend to do sometimes is that they just kind of throw us into the action, don't really give us much explanation, kind of like just give us like, oh, hey, this is the premise of the show, and then later on they'll then say, oh, hey, you want some explanation? Okay, well, here we go. I'm really glad that this is one of those shows where it's like, it's not just throwing you in there and just expecting you to kind of take it all in. It's going to give you, okay, here is Tex Tucker, here's him walking with Rocky and Dusty, and then they are on the, road to discovering, effectively 4 Feather Falls, and Tex Tucker getting his magic powers to effectively shoot the guns without touching them, be able to talk to his horse and his dog, and I can't remember what the fourth feather did.
So here's the thing. The first feather helped with talking to Rocky, the second feather helped with talking to Dusty, and 2 feathers are for the magic guns.
Oh, for both guns themselves. Oh, okay, then that's fine. I thought the 4th feather did like something mysterious, but no. I guess not. You know what? I think that was a bit of a mistake, really, because they could have had it where, like, oh, hey, here's the 3 feathers that you need to fire your guns and, talk to animals. But then the 4th feather, you could say, like, oh, hey, this is like a very secret magic power which will come later on in the show. Like, give some intrigue, like, going into that. But obviously, it's 1960s. These are like, also keep this in mind, 4 Feather Falls is just a 13-minute, like, episodic show. So it's clearly built to basically be in between, the certain time slots that Granada Television. By the way, this is based on Granada Television in the Northwest, by the way. Whether it had syndication across the other parts of the country, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it did. Maybe other people did buy the show. But in regards to how the show operates, it's sort of like it hits, between that time slot where, remember when, like, all the Looney Tunes and, like, all the Merry Melodies, like, were transferred over to broadcast television, and they had those, like, 5-10 minute time slots where they could just fill in with cartoon time?
Yes.
I think 4 Feather Falls basically fell into that time slot, I think. Mm-hmm. And because this was before children's ITV. Children's ITV didn't really become a thing until, like, the 1980s, and then it kind of, like, became its own thing eventually, further down the line. But 4 Feather Falls was, like, it wasn't really like built for CITV as of it. It was sort of kind of like built for like that time slot that you could fill in for, like, family entertainment if you wanted to.
Yeah.
I think that's my understanding of it anyway. Whether that's true or not, I'm not too sure. There's no really like any like broadcast schedules we can kind of go back to like see where we actually ended up. Mm-hmm. So while we're saying that, so with that, unfortunately, there is a bit of a negative towards that, and the fact is that a lot of like the episodes that they did, they only dedicate probably like maybe like 5 to 6 minutes worth of episode to the actual plot of the story. The rest of it is usually either kind of like the intro, and then there's like other bits that are reshot, and then there's just the songs themselves. And by the way, there's probably like maybe like 5, maybe 6 songs.
There are 6 songs in this. They are 4 Feather Falls, The Phantom Rider, The Rick Rackety Train, Happy Hearts and Friendly Faces, My Hometown, and the outro, which is Two Gun Tex of Texas.
Yeah, but like, I mean, don't get me wrong, those are really nice songs to listen to, and but the problem is that they repeat them 39 different times.
It is so
repetitive.
Yeah, it is so repetitive. Oh my god! I mean, this is a show that is not meant to be binge watched.
Well, yeah, we binge watched it, and here we are. So like, now I can't get 4 Feather Falls out of my head. By the way, there really are catchy tunes, and so I think maybe that was a good thing that they did. They said, okay, well, let's just make a couple couple of tracks and then we'll kind of repeat them because, if you think about it, like, if that's all the kids are going to hear, like, it's they're going to eventually catch on to their minds and eventually you're going to keep doing. That's what happens with us.
Yeah, well, I mean, today, that's inexcusable if you do that because nowadays, a lot of modern TV shows, when they have a song, they have a different song in every episode. Chalk Zone, Phineas and Ferb, recently, The Ghost and Molly McGee, they always have like different songs mixed into it.
Then you can say, but mind you, some of them are kind of like built to be musicals. So, like, The Ghost of Molly McGee was built to be kind of like a musical show.
Yeah,
so, there are those episodes, there are those shows that actually are built for that particular kind of thing.
Yeah, like Gem and the Holograms is another example.
Yeah, but obviously this is not Gem and the Holograms; it's Four Feather Falls, and so it was anything. I guess they only had so much time to put people in the studio and record whatever tracks they'd be able to record, and then after that it was like dedicated to the story, and so you do get the origin story, which I think is great. But I think the one thing that's a bit confusing about the origin story, it kind of like it says that Tex Tucker kind of went out, founded Four Feather Falls, but then other people came after the fact. I think that's the way that it sort of kind of plays out.
Yeah, because you have one of the characters, Grandpa Twink, who tells his grandson Jake about how Tex became the sheriff of Four Feather Falls.
Yeah, but it kind of makes you wonder, how old actually is Tex Tucker compared to everybody else? If this happened, that Grandpa's telling the story.
Yeah, the timeline doesn't really make a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't. I mean, I'm guessing that Tex Tucker kind of went out, founded Four Feather Falls, and everybody kind of followed along afterwards. I'm guessing.
I guess so. I'm not sure, or maybe.
That's the reason why he's so well respected, because not only is he the sheriff, he's the founder of the town. I guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but they kind of make it out like the guy who. Anyway, before we even get into all of that, maybe we should probably talk about all our characters.
Okay, yeah, let's talk
we
about.
We covered Makuya, Kalamukuya, who are the Native Americans in this, and there's also another called Red Scalp, unfortunately.
Yeah, Red Scalp is the rogue Native American.
He is, and he also has some other rogue Native Americans as well.
They don't have names.
Yeah, it's funny because you would have thought there'd be more of an episode talk about how they're at war with Kalamukuya's tribe or something like that. But I guess they didn't have enough time to kind of do that. I guess
that would have been really interesting. It's like you have a rogue Native American who left his tribe. What happened? Did he want to be chief and he was denied, or did he do something so bad that he was banished or exiled? And
yeah, well, the one thing you're going to find in these shows is why did they leave so many things open ended? Well, welcome to the wonderful world of the 39-minute episodic show, and the fact that certain producers thought, okay, well, you've done enough of that now, let's move on to the next new project. And he kept going and going and going and going. And you're going to find out quite a lot about that in this podcast.
Yeah. And not to mention that, because it's the 1960s, something along the lines of story progression and character growth is non-existent here.
Well, I mean, some 90s kids will probably argue that a lot of other shows didn't really have that either. They just had, a bunch of episodes that were built to, repeat on, en masse. Effectively, I'm looking at you, Nickelodeon. But anyway, I digress. We talk about the way Four Feather Falls is built, and so the characters that we have in this show, obviously we talked about Pedro and Fernando being, I guess you could say, our Dr. Robotnik and, Scratch and Grounder of this show, I guess you could say.
Yeah, so you have Pedro, who's essentially like the brains of the operation, well, the closest thing to brains.
I guess. He has no education whatsoever.
And then you have
he can't count, he can't spell.
And every single one of his plans fail.
Yeah.
And then you have Fernando,
you know what? That's actually kind of clever to do that, because if you make your villain, he's clever, but he's not intelligent. He knows how to, he thinks he knows how to make his way through the system, but in actual fact, he is a complete charlatan. He will effectively be found out if you ask him too many questions. Mm-hmm. And that happens many times in Four Feather Falls, thanks to our heroics of Tex Tucker and his intelligent brain, I guess you could say. It's actually really clever, because you're telling kids, here's Pedro, and he thinks he's being clever, and he actually keeps falling on his face every time he goes, and here you have Tex Tucker actually sussing him out and actually using his mind and, learning about stuff. And so, if anything, having I guess you could say a stupid villain is actually a really good lesson for kids. I guess because you end up being kind of like a crook, like Pedro, if you end up not, being smart enough to, make your way through life.
Yeah.
So I think that's, I guess you could say a good message, I guess you could say, in some instances. And the one thing, though, that we kept laughing about Pedro, though, and unfortunately this is because me and Patricia grew up in the 90s and we're massive fans of Nintendo. He looks like Wario.
He does look like Wario.
And we were making Wario jokes throughout the time that he was on screen. Oh, good grief.
He even says Mamma Mia at one point.
Oh, yeah, like, it's just, even that doesn't make any sense, because, like, he's supposed to be, like...
he's Mexican.
He's Mexican, yeah, so why is he speaking Italian?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think they understood this too much, but mind you, I guess it's 1960 and it's the West, so I guess no one really understood how these things worked.
No, and it's kind of funny to think that a British television company is doing an American-style Western.
Yeah, like, unfortunately, like we said at the very beginning of this podcast, there are a lot of things that are just, completely, not correct and just wrong about this show. But, it's a show with Supermarionation, and it is a product of its time, so you have to forgive it in some instances. Obviously you get those characters. We also get like a bunch of lots of side characters as well.
Yeah, there's a ton of them.
Yeah, like we have Mama J, who runs the general store, and then we have Jimmy, who's like the kid.
No, Jake is the kid.
Jake is the kid.
Yeah,
sorry.
Jimmy is a character that we'll talk about in the next podcast.
Oh, okay, then that's fine. And then you also you get many of the townsfolk as well. You have the person who runs the bank, and then you have Doc as well, who's literally just called Doc.
Yeah.
And I thought he was a Scotsman, but an Irishman, but I think he's actually a Scotsman, I think.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was kind of hard to pin down there a little bit. But you get this really... But the thing I would say about the cast of characters, regardless of how, ill-conceived they are, for the time, they actually are fun characters to be around. And, I don't know about everybody else. I thought Callum McCoy was actually kind of cool. The fact that he's this magical Native American who...
Yeah, but it definitely does play to the stereotype of like, oh, here's the mystic Native American. All Native Americans apparently have magical powers.
Well, it seems like the way that this works is that only he seems to have magical powers and nobody else does.
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, it's an unfortunate trope that does plague in a lot of TV shows at the time.
Yeah, it does, and I would say that I think out of all the portrayals, I think this one isn't too bad. I don't think I think there's been worse portrayals.
Fair enough.
I think of characters, and the one thing I would say is that if anything, probably the more whiter cast, I think, are probably getting worse, because anyone who's not Tex Tucker and anyone who's in part of Feather Falls, anyone who seems to be a stranger, unless it's like a really special guest, like they seem to be portrayed as like either cheats or con men or bad guys or rustlers or anything like that. Like they are portrayed as like pretty bad people.
Yes.
Like even worse than I would say the Native Americans are.
Yeah.
With the exception of Red Scalp. But if anything, it sort of kind of gives this really uncomfortable as of like, you can only trust like, your own circle of friends in this whole place. And like anyone who comes outside of it obviously is an enemy. Which is kind of a shame really, because there was episodes where we kind of like looked and like it was like, for example, there was the episode where, the guy who came in with the did all the gun tricks and everything. And like,
oh yeah, the showman.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, the showman. And like, he wasn't really, he didn't like portray himself as like, a massive tough guy or anything like that. He was just the guy who like just do tricks. And then when he was being threatened by Big Ben, like he was just saying, oh, well, I'm not a guy who fights. I'm just a guy who knows how to shoot a gun. Tex Tucker obviously had to come in and save the day in that regard. And so, but, I don't think it was a bit unfair. I think it was a bit unfair to, like, portray him as, like, saying, oh, he's just some kind of, just massive show off. Like, that's his trade. That's what he does, he does gun shows, I thought that was a little bit unfair. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, that's true, because the character who's a one-off in this episode named Buck Reavers, he comes into Four Feather Falls so he can be able to show off his gun tricks. And there's a lot of people who have, like, this connotation is like, oh, this guy is a massive show-off, and he claims to be the fastest and the bestest and the westest, and so we're going to basically, like, take him down. And in reality, he's completely scared because he's a showman. He just does a lot of parlor tricks. He doesn't defend himself using his guns. He can shoot coins up in the air, and he can be able to shoot a pipe from somebody who's blindfolded. So, yeah, it's completely fair if you're talented with one thing and you're not with the other. It's like somebody who's a chef. It's like, just because you know how to cook doesn't mean you know how to bake. Those are two different skills, even though that they seem similar.
Yeah. In one episode I thought was a bit disappointing is that we had obviously like every single episode like these types of shows always seems to have like the election show. Like, like I'm going to run for class president, or I'm going to like run for office, or like, for example, like in Recess, you had like, Vincent, not Spinelli. It was who was the other one? I can't remember.
TJ? Gus?
It was no, it was the girl with the glasses.
Oh, Gretchen.
Gretchen, yes, they were like the whole class president thing, and then you had Mr. Green from Hey Arnold. He ran for councilman, if you remember, in episode of Hey Arnold. And this one also has an election episode, but it's Tex Tucker actually being re-elected for sheriff of the town, and which is quite interesting because it shows that Tex Tucker is a fair guy. Like, he's not just going to be this domineering sheriff who takes over everything. He does do it at the consent of the town folk of Four Feather Falls.
Yeah.
So so laughingly Pedro throws himself as an opponent to become sheriff of Four Feather Falls, and just watching everyone laugh is just hilarious. Because I'm really glad that they put this episode further down the line, because you had an opportunity for everyone to realize that Pedro has done so many bad things. How on earth could this guy end up being sheriff? And but the one thing I thought was funny is that Tex Tucker didn't really give himself a manifesto or like a speech or anything like that. He basically just sung to everybody, and it's a song that we've heard countless times already in the show.
Yeah, it's the outro song.
Yeah, but you would have thought they would have Pedro actually sing a song as well, and that would have been hilarious if he just sung a really bad song that everyone really hated, and it's just good grief. And also it was this is a typical we're gonna rig the election in our favor and things like that, and then Tex Tucker comes to the rescue and gets the ballot box back and everything. So it's one of those episodes where the bad guys once again tries to rig the election and everything. And I think that in some episodes like that, I felt like there was some missed opportunities. I don't know how you feel about some of the other episodes that were.
Oh yeah, I felt that there were some that felt it was just too short, or while you're getting yourself invested in the plot, it's like right before you know it, it's over, and it's like, wow, that's it. Yeah, I think that the 13 episodes,
You could tell they were running short of time with some of the ones they were writing, couldn't you?
Yeah, I think that we've grown up with shows that had episodes that were 5, 7, or 11 minutes long, and they're able to tell way more cohesive stories than this. It just goes to show you that we've come a long way from writing stories in TV shows.
That's true, and I think maybe because obviously you got to walk before you can run, and so I guess with Four Feather Falls and various other shows like this, walks so various other shows in the 80s and 90s could then run. And I guess you could say, and so you can't really fault it for that, because you could argue that it's kind of unusual that you go into gung ho into a plot, and then all of a sudden it's a one line out, and then all of a sudden it's the credits. It's that's sort of kind of weird.
Yeah, that is very weird. It just felt like there should have been more explanation, they should have cut this scene out to add more stuff into it, or they should have furthered the pace along because it was a little bit slow or something like that. There should have been at least a few more rewrites right before they released it to the
Yeah, we don't actually know how long it took for them to actually make this show, actually what time frame they were allowed to make it in, because I can probably imagine for something like this they probably were under a tight budget and under tight time constraints to get episodes out. Keep this in mind, it was 13-minute episodes and 39 that were only able to release at the time. So who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
The sounds, to be honest with you, it just looks like a typical 1960s show. Ignore the puppets, ignore the sets and everything. Keep in mind, the puppets and the sets, are what makes, Supermarionation shows really special in all of this. But, in regards to how it's all shot and everything like that, it kind of looks like it's your typical 1960s show, really.
Yeah, it definitely does look like if it was Gunsmoke mixed with puppets.
Yeah, exactly. But, it just, you can hear, the sound, obviously, wasn't preserved. And definitely it doesn't translate well, obviously to we actually had to insist with Patricia that we watch this on her iPad, when we're watching the shows, because if we watched it on our 4K TV, it would have just torn the show apart.
Yeah,
it doesn't translate well to high definition.
No, not really.
Yeah, so, yeah, and obviously there's also little mistakes that happen as well. Like, there's this one time when I think when Grandpa and, and Jake are running away from, like, the Indians or, like, running away from being shot. And there's this one bit where, like, Grandpa says, oh, well, I'm going to get my gun and fire back. But you notice that in the, while the scene was playing, the gun actually fell out of the trailer. And then in the next scene, it's back again. Like, there were some, like, little mistakes that they had in there, which they kind of mistake. And funny, Woody's Roundup in Toy Story 2 actually made fun of this, actually. Be like, things that happened, like, in the shots that they didn't bother to correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's to be expected, where I'm sure that, nowadays you can be able to, like, do a different take because we're doing, like, digital cameras nowadays. But, I mean, I'm sure that back then, when you're dealing with, like, 35 millimeter film, it's going to take a lot of time to take multiple takes so you can be able to get the right one.
Well, I don't think it's that. It's like, even then, like, even if you, like, finally got it put together and you finally have a final product, I mean, like, if you find, when you're going through it that you've missed something, you've missed it, like, it's already in final print and it's already off to the studio, so there's not much you can really do about it. And it's not the kind of quality control thing that we don't have today.
No, and definitely not today. But yeah, I mean, I would say that looking at the sets compared to the sets that would follow up in later Supermarionation shows, it does feel kind of limited. Like, you have the town, and maybe you have, like, desert and, like, various other things, but that's it for the most part.
Yeah, but it's, I mean, with a Western, there's not really much else you can really go with it, really. Like, it's not going to be like other shows that we're going to, like, go further on. Like, dare I say, this is probably, like, one of the more restricted shows that we have, because at least with the Supercar, which we'll talk about, like, in the next episode, that we had a car that you can go all over the world with, and, like, that's actually where Supermarionation kind of went after that. Like, dare I say, Four Feather Falls is probably the most contained show because it only kind of ever takes place in Four Feather Falls. You can't go to, like, I mean, there's a part in one of Tex Tucker's songs about going to Monte Carlo, but, like, in Four Feather Falls you can't exactly do that, can you?
No, not really. And the only time that Four Feather Falls was ever referenced in future Supermarionation shows was in the episode of Fireball XL5 1875, where you had let's see, what was it?
Well, keep in mind, they also did, like, when the kid was watching the Cowboys and Indians shows, that actually were clips of Four Feather Falls.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Actually were in there. So, like, there were times in Fireball XL5 where they actually were able to sneak this footage into there, for, in fact, it was on TV. So, Four Feather Falls actually does get quite a few. Funny enough, like, you can see in Four Feather Falls, actually, a lot of the other Supermarionation shows take inspiration from it, because, dare I say, the intro of Four Feather Falls almost feels like Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons. Like, you see Malabacuya, giving powers to Tex Tucker, and then you just see it just slowly going, across the town, and then you see Tex Tucker put his hands up in the air, and then all of a sudden his guns come flying out, a la, when Captain Scarlet gets nearly gets shot to pieces, but then he just fires one bullet and kills the guy.
Yeah.
Dare I say, I think that probably Captain Scarlet and the Mysterons took inspiration from, Four Feather Falls' intro.
Yeah, and not to mention that every single Supermarionation show from that point onward said starring this character, and not as opposed to, like, in the credits where you see, like, actor plays this character. It's like, no. In Four Feather Falls, it says starring Tex Tucker. When you see Supercar, it says starring Mike Mercury. Or when you see in Fireball XL5, starring Steve Zodiac. So, yeah, every single character is introduced starring in this particular show.
Well, they did that also as well in Thunderbirds, and they did that in Stingray, and they did continue doing that. So, we haven't actually gone through all of Joe 19 and gone through the Secret Service yet, so I don't know if they'll do that as well. But, I mean, it was a tradition that was carried on throughout Supermarionation shows after that.
Yeah, and another tradition that would be followed up are Barry Gray, who would compose a lot of the music of all of Gerry Anderson's shows. And, funny enough, we have essentially our lucky charm, as they say. They always call, John Ratzenberger for every Pixar film that he ever starred in. Well, we have a person who would star or play a character in pretty much every single Supermarionation show, and that's David Graham. Mm-hmm. He would play multiple characters in every...
And for those of you who do not know who great David Graham is, if you come from the Peppa Pig era, he's the grandpa character in Peppa Pig, I believe.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So, by the way, he passed away last year. Actually.
At the age of 99.
Yeah, 99. So,
he was probably like one of, if maybe the last actor who probably was still alive when, a lot of the stuff was being aired at the time. Like,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, a lot of people have since passed away like decades ago at that point. But, he was like one of the last who was still around. And I remember when, I think we probably heard about this and maybe we even talked about it on Arun and Patricia's. Like, for many people, they knew him as Grandpa Pig from Peppa Pig, but his catalog is way more than that.
It is, actually, and we're going to be talking about through a lot of it going through this podcast. So, I'm really glad that we're actually going to talk about this and pay tribute to him because he was such a talented performer.
Yeah, I mean, he voiced the Daleks in Doctor Who, and he was in a lot of movies and TV shows. I mean, he was a massive voice actor.
Oh, but for me, he's always Parker. Yeah, but we'll talk about more of that in the Thunderbirds podcast. I promise you that. So, in regards to everything that we talked about, really, like, there's not really much else to kind of write home about, really. Like, it's just, unfortunately, the show suffers because the political incorrectness of some of the characters and I guess some of the limitations in the stories as well. Like some of them aren't really much different from your typical there's the switcheroo episode as well where Fernando dresses up as a wanted criminal and even though he's a wanted criminal himself square that circle forever for me, and he ends up getting locked up and then Pedro has to break him out to keep the gold and then keep Fernando at the same time.
And there's also another episode where you have Pedro has gone straight. He no longer wants to be the bad guy. He wants to be a respected member of Four Feather Falls, but no, it's just a facade.
Yeah, and the one thing I do like Fernando sometimes can be kind of a cool character in some cases because he when he's being threatened and he obviously doesn't want to be shot. His last resort, he'll either reach somewhere either behind his head or behind his neck or through his sleeve, and he'll just pull out a dagger and just throw it at somebody. And in a way, that's kind of a cool little thing that he can do. And if anything, it was kind of hilarious when he threw the dagger and it released the window and it smashed the guy in the head, and then he just kind of just pushed him down. And once that whole scene had played out, I just thought, Fernando, you're so cool. That's so smooth. Oh, good grief! But why are you a bad guy? You know what? Actually, out of everyone that would have gone straight, I think Fernando probably would have gone straight in the end.
Yeah, I think so too, because, he doesn't seem like a bad guy. He just seems to be a person who's just put in a really rough situation because he doesn't know any better. And I think that if he would have led toward a path of good, I'm sure that he would have came off, a much better person.
Yeah. This is probably going to be a bit of an unfair conversation to have, but, who do you think, is a better, bad guy duo, I guess you say, Master Spy Zarin in, Supercar or Pedro and Fernando in Four Feather Falls?
Okay, which brand of stupid should we compare them to?
I think it's who's more fun? Who would you rather, if you had Tex Tucker or you had, Mike Mercury and they had to take on a bad guy duo, like any superhero had a bad guy duo, and you had two group of people to kind of work with. You had Master Spy and Zarin, or you had Pedro and Fernando. I don't know. My bias is obviously towards the fact that Pedro, we can keep making Wario jokes out of him. Obviously I was going with Pedro and Fernando. I don't know. Master Spy, we'll talk about later on in Supercar, and but dare I say, after watching Four Feather Falls, I think Pedro and Fernando are actually quite a fun duo to actually have as your fall guy villains, if anything, for our hero to accomplish himself.
Yeah, sure. They are fun because at times they are able to accomplish their goals, or they team up with the bad guy of the week so that they can be able to get money so they can, eat, or they can be able to buy things so that they can be able to survive. But then, we have the unfortunate thing they were duped by the bad guy, or, Tex Tucker had captured them and now they're in jail or something like that. So, yeah, they are fun to be around. But if we're talking about at least the slightest bit of competency, then, Master Spy and Zarin are definitely that.
Mm-hmm. The other villains in the show, unfortunately, they are kind of one note, really. It's I'm a big tough guy, and I'm going to take out Tex Tucker, and because I want to accomplish, evil deed.
Yeah.
And, but then, obviously, the Tex Tucker just comes and saves the day, really. And, like, even when his magic guns aren't, on him, or he's lost his magic hat, like, eventually he ends up either getting it back, or he just, or the guns just basically just fire themselves, effectively. So, the thing is that with one of these things, even, it's funny, like, when one of the one-time villains comes in, and Pedro Fernando are there, and, like, he's gonna be, I'm gonna be the guy who's gonna beat Tex Tucker, and Pedro Fernando kind of just say to the audience, we all know what's gonna happen next, and then boom, like, the magic gun fires the guy, the gun out of the guy's hand.
Yeah,
and then that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, same thing with Big Ben, in which every single time he's paired up with somebody, it's like, don't underestimate Tex Tucker. He has those magic guns, and, they don't listen to him, or, they think they're tougher than him, or they try to outsmart him, and then...
that's a realistic scenario. Don't get me wrong, like, I can understand why a lot of, like, rough characters would want to have a go at Tex Tucker, because they're not going to believe in a million years that this guy has met a magic Native American who's given him magic guns and they can fire all by themselves. Who on earth would believe that? Like, it's poppycock. But then obviously, you have the other bad guys who are like, regular villains in the show, who then, back up the fact that that's what's going to happen. I don't know if they do that because, the kids are going to be like, oh yeah, come on, it's coming up, and there is a bit of a satisfaction watching, like, this stupid villain get his, like, comeuppance, and, like, he's gets put in his place. Obviously there's a good feeling after that happens, but when you've seen it, like, happen, like, like 5 to 10 different times, it sort of kind of becomes a bit tiresome, a little bit.
It does.
Yeah. It kind of, don't you get the feeling like this is a show that I think they're expecting people not to, like, have watched, like, multiple times, and, like, they're expecting to, like, catch them either, like, on the 10th episode or the 15th episode or the 20th episode. Don't you get that feeling like they don't expect you, because they don't actually do any callbacks to, like, any other episodes.
No, they don't.
Yeah, and there's no clip show, by the way. No clip show. I'm actually happy about that.
But there is a trope that does follow in a lot of other Supermarionation shows, the dream sequence.
Oh yeah, well, there's the dream sequences, but all the episodes have those, and to be honest with you, it's just Jake effectively, like, thinking that he's going to become the sheriff of Four Feather Falls.
Or, that episode that we mentioned earlier about Fernando switching over with the other bandit. That was also a dream sequence as well.
But that didn't necessarily have to be a dream sequence.
No, it didn't, but it was.
Well, yeah, that could have easily been its own episode. It could have easily been an episode of episode. The dream sequence is unnecessary.
Yeah, but it happened.
I know, exactly. Yeah, like,
Oh, trust me, we'll be getting into dream sequences in all the other podcasts. Like, yeah. wait till you hear us talking about the supercar one.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I think out of all the dream sequences, I think this was probably the most unnecessary one.
Absolutely, yeah.
Exactly,
there was no reason for it to be a dream.
The other ones that we're going to talk about in the other show, I think, obviously we taped those before we obviously did this episode. But I can sort of, like, with this episode of the dream sequences, I think this was one of the most unnecessary dream sequences. I think it could have easily just been its own episode and be like, oh well, because the thing is, like, they always seem to do rinse and repeat with these episodes as well. Like, no matter how many times Pedro and Fernando end up in jail, or Big Ben end up in jail, like, they always seem to be always out, like, after a couple of days, and then after that, we're back to doing the next episode,
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that was what this show was from the get-go, is that, it's not like today in which we can be able to sit down and binge watch through every single episode of every single show ever. Back then, in the 1960s, like, reruns were pretty rare. Like, the fact that you can be able to watch a show, from a previous day was something that wasn't done very often, or even at all. If you were to tune into an episode of a TV show that you wanted, most likely it's not going to be the one that your friend saw. It's going to be a completely different one, and there's no way that you can be able to, go back and rewatch it again, or, have some, have like a physical form of you watching it again. There was no VHS back then where you could be able to record and play it off again. Not in the 1960s, absolutely not. So yeah, this was definitely a show that was not meant to be binge watched. It was probably like, maybe it came out every week, or maybe like every day when a kid gets home after school or something like that. But there might be a chance that maybe they won't watch that show. Maybe they'll watch another show, or maybe their parents are tuning into the news or something. So yeah, I think that this is a show that would come in every once in a while for people to tune into, and they'll enjoy it. And then afterwards, if they have an opportunity to rewatch it again, they would. And this show was in syndication on television until 1968, but wouldn't become available for public viewing until 2005 when the DVDs came out. So yeah, this was kind of like a lost show, especially when all of the other Supermarionation shows took it over.
Yeah, well, the thing is that you can't put this on TV today.
No.
You can't.
No, you can't.
Yeah, it's unfortunately, it is just kind of frozen in time, this show, and there's just too many, politically incorrect stuff that's happening in this
Yeah,
stuff.
we're talking about politically incorrect for the Native American portrayals.
We're not talking about, Tex Tucker says the N-word, really out loud or anything like that. It's not that far. But,
well, I mean, there's no African American characters in this, which, thank God.
Yeah, I'm really glad that there isn't,
And that's not to say there weren't any African American cowboys. They were, but considering that it was released in 1960, I don't like to even imagine how they would have been portrayed.
Yeah, it's just there's only two sets of people that seem to exist in this show. It's either the European sort of white people and the Native Americans. And
there's also the Mexicans.
And the Mexicans as well. Yeah, exactly.
But even then, they're portrayed in the most stereotypical way. Like Fernando, for example, he's constantly sleeping and he's lazy.
Well, they're all sleeping in this episode. Yeah, that's another thing as well. The Mexicans are sort of portrayed. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think I actually saw a positive portrayal of a Mexican character in this show. I might be wrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, they cause trouble. They're lazy.
They sleep. They rob people. Yeah. It's not good.
No, this is just all forms of wrong.
If anything, probably the Native Americans in this show probably get a better, portrayal than probably some of the Mexican characters.
No, I disagree because
really?
You have the broken English. You have Kaya Makuya, who's a magical person. It also plays into another stereotype that Tex Tucker is the white savior, because there's one episode in which when Kaya Makuya goes over to Tex Tucker begging him to rescue Makuya, who is sick from the fever, saying white men have good medicine. Tex Tucker, Kaya Makuya needs you. And it's yeah, that's kind of uncomfortable. It's I understand that, under the circumstances that maybe, depending on what the disease is, natural elements couldn't be able to, cure him. But, the fact that, most likely they were probably kicked out of the land where originally they were probably from, which was Four Feather Falls.
Yeah, exactly.
So, again, I'm sorry, I disagree with you, but...
I mean, it's everything in the show, the way this is portrayed is obviously wrong. But again, like we said before, it's a product of its time. And I think they couldn't do Four Feather Falls in 2025.
Absolutely not.
They just couldn't. And,
even today when we have Westerns, and by the way, it's funny because this show came out in a time in which Westerns were massive. Yeah. Nowadays, Westerns are almost an endangered species.
Well, it's kind of like what they said in Toy Story 2, where once the space rockets went up, where Western shows went down. And
and children wanted to play with space toys.
Exactly, yeah. So
and, the same thing is today, in which, you have the occasional Western, I guess the closest thing would probably be Yellowstone in its series, and Kevin Costner even released that that 15-year project of that Western movie that he wanted to do, massive. He wanted to make it a massive franchise or something. He had a massive story that he wanted to tell. Movie came out in theaters, massive box office bomb.
Mm-hmm. So, we're kind of moving off topic here, so I guess, maybe we should probably wrap this up and say that, look, it's, if you're ready to, just put away the fact that the portrayals in this show are really, really terrible, maybe if you just put that to one side and just kind of enjoy it for, the product that it is at the time of 1960, you probably might get some enjoyment out of it, but, but unfortunately, if you don't want to be easily offended, and if you don't want to, if you don't want to watch this show and feel like you're going to get massively offended really easily, I would say give it a skip.
Yeah, I would say it's only recommended for people who want to know where Supermarionation got its start.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everybody else who is just genuinely curious into watching it, I would just skip it and watch the other shows that would follow later.
But even then, for what, we're about to talk into, even the portrayals of, certain people were not very good either. So, unfortunately, everybody in this podcast series, that's what we're going to be walking into. But if you're willing to put that one side, you might get some enjoyment out of this. But if not, I'd probably just say give this a skip.
Yeah, I would say give this a skip, too. I mean, there are some decent things that you can take away from this. The voice cast, even though that is very limited, is very good. Some of the music is really good too. And again, this is the starting point of what would be later on the legacy of Supermarionation. But if you're going to watch this as it's a standalone thing, it's kind of hard to look back on it, especially if you've gotten a taste of the other later Supermarionation shows like Thunderbirds or Captain Scarlet. The pacing is really, really slow or really, really quick, considering that it's only 13 minutes long. It's very repetitive. And yeah, again, the character portrayals are very, very politically incorrect by today's standards. So yeah, as a standalone...
And by the way, Tex Tucker apparently somehow is the only good-looking character in the show.
Yeah.
Everybody else looked like just really ugly looking for some strange reason.
Yeah,
I don't understand why.
It's that's crazy. It's like every single character looks awful. I mean,
You think the good characters would look like, very handsome and look very lovely characters, wouldn't you? And then like all the bad guys would be like, horribly disfigured.
Yeah, like Pedro again looks like Wario. Big Ben has these massive lips. One of his partners has like a derpy face with an overbite. Some of them have big noses. Some of them have like massive chins. They just don't look right.
Mama Jane looks like a platypus.
Oh yeah, like, oh god. And she's the only woman in this entire series.
Oh, just really, yeah, that's correct, isn't it? Like, how's this town procreating? Like, it's just, like...
That's what I say every time we talk about a fantasy. It's like, how are these characters able to procreate if there's like little to no women? And she's an old woman too. So it's like,
Is this the reason why they call her Ma Jones? She's actually everyone's Ma.
Oh
God, good grief. Oh no.
Okay.
Can you imagine like, prostitution was a thing, like, back in the Old West and things like that. Like, that's one thing we thought we were going to talk about. Like, where's all like the kind of like, the more racy portrayals.
Yeah.
Like, you had enough for like all this political incorrectness, but you couldn't include like any like, women who were like, just there for for lonely travelers.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, you can be able to show off smoking and drinking, but you couldn't put at least one prostitute in there.
Exactly. Yeah. They kind of like not is like they can't just outright say that she's a prostitute. It'd be kind of like just like she just happens to be like the good-looking woman who just happens to like be at the hotel. You don't actually they kind of like leave it kind of like ambiguous about actually what she does there.
Yeah.
Like, and you're like, Papa, Daddy, is she the bartender? He's like, oh, sorry, the like the waitress. Like, he's like, yes, son, she's the waitress. Oh my! Can you imagine they included that character?
Yes, she's the waitress that has a lot of features.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, but yeah, other characters that we forgot to mention are the animal characters. You have Rocky the horse and Dusty the dog, who are the animal companions, and there would be animal companions in later Supermarionation shows.
There will be, yeah, and obviously, like, we're not going to go as far as like Mr. Red the talking horse at any point, but I mean, like, Rocky basically has like a British accent because
reasons.
For reasons, yeah. But no, I mean the reason is because apparently he has ancestry in Britain, so like that's where his apparently that's where all of his horses come from. But that's the reason for that. And Dusty is just your typical kind of like rough kind of like
he's just basically like the loyal dog, who is alongside with Tex, and he reports on anything.
I think he wears clothes as well. Like
he does.
We couldn't really tell like in the how black and white and how like it wasn't. And he really is remastering some of this. Some of these.
I think they did remaster it on DVD, but unfortunately we do not have the DVD for it.
Oh, okay, then that's fine. So.
Yeah, but I think he wears like a vest or something. But
he's wearing like dungarees or something like that.
I don't know.
It's weird, but you have that, and but besides that, like none of the other horses, like animals talk in this show.
No, so. it's just Rocky and Dusty, and the only reason is because of the feathers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But, final thoughts. It's not a show that I would just...
It's politically incorrect. If you don't like that type of stuff, don't watch it. But if you like I was saying, if you're saying before, Patricia, if you're curious about, the start of Gerry Anderson's projects, then, give it a whirl.
Yeah, but I would just suggest that if you really want to see where Gerry Anderson would go from here on out, I would recommend that you watch the next show we're going to be talking about.
We are going to be talking about Supercar.
So until then, everyone, take care.
Bye-bye.
Two-gun Tex of Texas is a guy with the straightest deal, but he keeps the law with the fastest draw and a nerve as strong as steel. Oh, two-gun Tex of Texas is a friend who'd never fail. But if you did wrong, wouldn't take him long to clap you right in jail. He's known throughout all Kansas, through every single mile, as a rootin', tootin', highfalutin' sheriff with a smile. Two-gun Tex of Texas will never let you down, but play it bad and he'll get mad. So cover your tracks from Two-Gun Tex, the smartest guy in town. The smartest guy in town.